Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley. Hello and welcome to the WP Builds podcast. We're now on episode 75. That's 1/4 Woohoo! This is entitled ACF Elliot Condon tells us all about his enormously cool plugin. So I suppose that gives you a little bit of a clue as to who is on this week. This episode was published on the 10th of May 2018. My name's Nathan Wrigley from pictureandword.co.uk, a small web development agency based in the north of England, and I'll be joined later for our discussion by David Wormsley from davidwormsley.com. Our discussion today is called Never Talk About Politics, Religion or Website Hosting. Yeah. And right at the end, we've got the ending fact, which is entitled How Many WordPress Comments? Please use the share buttons on the wpbuilds.com website. We always like 5-star reviews on iTunes. It really does help us out a great deal. And we've got a bunch of links. Everything I'm about to say is preceded by wpbuilds.com. So, for example, if you would like to join our growing Facebook group, we've got over 1.1 thousand people in there now. You go to wpbuilds.com/Facebook. If you'd like to get our newsletter, which we send out just to alert you about the podcast, then it's /subscribe. If you're interested in advertising on the podcast, we would really love to hear from you, actually. That would be tremendous, and that's /advertise. /YouTube, if you want to find our YouTube channel. Basically, it's the same thing as going to the website, only it's on YouTube. And we've got a Slack group now called I think it's called the WP Builds Slack channel or something like that. Anyway, it's at /Slack. So if Slack's your thing, maybe that's somewhere to go. We've just ended a competition which was for 3 licenses for Smart Slider Pro. And I've already in the Facebook group posted who the winners were. I hope I managed to tag you correctly with your Facebook tags. Anyway, it was Dave Cocking, Jane Breckener, I've probably pronounced that wrong, Brenneker, Jane Brenneker, let's go with that, and Louise Toft Peterson. Hopefully you've been contacted now by Daniel David, the person who was on the show, connected with Smart Slider 3, and brilliant. I'm really pleased that we can get some prizes into people's hands, and it's a great thanks to the guys over at Smart Slider 3 for offering that lovely prize. Okay, as I said, in a moment, David and I are going to be talking about never talk about politics, religion or website hosting. And then right at the end, 5 minutes or so on how many WordPress comments. But before we get to the last little bit, I'm going to be talking to Elliot Condon. Elliot Condon is the person who is entirely behind ACF. And if you haven't used ACF before, it stands for Advanced Custom Fields. He's a really, really, really nice guy. Who lives in Australia, and we hooked up and we talked about him quite a lot, actually. Talked about just him as a person, what he was like at school, what he did when he was a youngster, how he got into his computers and all of that. And then we obviously migrate and talk about ACF and what it's useful for, how it's being used, how he put it together. And then obviously we talk about the future, Gutenberg, and what's on the roadmap. It's really worth listening to. As I said, very, very nice guy indeed. Okay, but for now, we will go over to the discussion between David and I. I hope you enjoy this week's podcast.
This discussion we are calling Never Talk About Politics, Religion and Website Hosting. And it actually comes as a request from David McCann, who thought that we ought to talk about something useful for a change. And I completely agree with him. He didn't say that. He's a lovely man. He would never say anything like that.
He will now.
As true as it is. So yeah, we're going to talk about hosting, and this is quite a delicate one, really, because we all love to talk about these in our various Facebook groups, Slack channels, and forums, but equally people hate talking about it as well and say shut up. So we're going to try and, if you like, clear up, I guess, some of the problems I think in those discussions, and try and get, if we can, to talking about the different types of hosting and the pros and cons of selecting different types.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that what we're trying to do?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. I think probably it's important at this stage to say that both David and I probably tried different things out in the past. Me, I think, considerably less than David. But we don't really have an answer what is the best one, because that's just fraught with problems. You know, the technologies change all the time. All of these companies will constantly be looking at their product and trying to tweak and get the most CPU cycles out of it and make it faster than their rivals. So what might be true today is not going to be true tomorrow. So this is not an advice column. This is just us discussing, I think, the different types of hosting that are available and what your options are. So let's go from there, shall we?
Yeah, let's do that. And that is exactly my beef with some of these discussions. As much as I like to join in them, they don't tend to talk about the needs. And the best is going to be dependent on the amount of support you need, your level of skill, your costs, and the power that you need. And I think it's always a balance between these three things. Yeah. But anyway, let's talk
just
about
one thing before we go anywhere. I think one of the traps that you can fall into if you're literally beginning for the first time is to Google what is the best host or something like that, because the internet is full of affiliate marketing sites where they simply don't tell it. They're just not interested in telling you what's really going on. They're just interested in getting the most affiliate commissions. So be a bit careful if you find a site ranking things. Maybe go elsewhere and look a little bit further than that.
Yeah, but it's always the same ones. It's the ones that pay the most that generally are the top ones.
Yes.
But anyway,
yes.
Yeah. So getting to the real basics, our different types of hosting, and it gets more complicated once we get past this, I think are shared, which is usually or traditionally the way that most people start, where you share your resources with other people on the same server. So you share your RAM and your CPU as well as your disk space with the server. Then we move up to VPS, virtual private server, of which you can get two types, managed and unmanaged, where you get your own allocated amount of RAM, but you're still on the same server as other people. And then finally, what you're doing, Nathan, which is having a dedicated setup where you get the whole kit and caboodle to yourself.
Yes. Yeah. The three tiers, usually, like you say, the cheapest one is shared hosting. And whilst I don't use this, I have vague memories of trying things out like this before. It's a bit of a lottery, I think, really, in that your website is going onto a hard disk somewhere on the planet, and you don't really have any control about who you are sharing that hard disk with. And my understanding is that your website could sit alongside dozens, maybe possibly even 50, 100 other websites, and because you're all sharing that exact same resource, the computer, things that are happening to their websites have a direct impact upon what's happening to your website. So, for example, if two of those sites are tremendously popular, then they're going to consume the CPU cycles, therefore slowing down your site. Two of those sites get hacked. It's probably fairly trivial for somebody who knows what they're doing to navigate the file structure and also infect and explore your website. So it's the cheapest option, but it's probably the least secure. Now, my understanding is that as time has gone on, there's been a lot of mitigating technology that has isolated those particular websites from each other to some extent. But nevertheless, I still think in terms of security, that's probably a truism that the shared hosting is the least secure.
Yeah, and I think, you see it often in these discussions. Somebody will say, you don't want to be on shared hosting. And then maybe that's not true these days in the same way, because I think when people are saying that, I would say that kind of thing before, because I was thinking about the starter hosting that you would generally get from something like GoDaddy is what I started on, and I was happy with them for many years. I stayed with them. And also many of those companies which we now know, like Bluehost and HostGator, which tend to come out as number one as people's choice, but they're all owned by Endurance International Company. And, and they are optimized for profit, no doubt. And you don't get a great deal of power with those. But I think these days, this is the way it gets more complex, is now we've got the specialist hosting, like we've got WP Engine, Pagely, possibly SiteGround because they give you free socks if you go to a meetup or a WordCamp. That's it. Yeah, they do focus on WordPress users, and I think, well, certainly with SiteGround, but I'm pretty sure that WP Engine and Pagely are effectively shared hosting. It's just that they give you a lot more power and take care of the security, and you pay more for it.
Yeah, the time when I was, I can't even remember the name of the company that I tried shared, but it was like a very brief affair. But I think the technology back then was pretty poor in that the segmentation wasn't there, and things did get infected much more rapidly. So I'm sure you're right. I'm sure that these things are much more well thought through now than they were in the past. So why? So that's the cheapest thing, shared hosting, and it's got its drawbacks and its benefits, largely being cost. Why would anybody wish to step up to the next price tier usually, which is VPS, Virtual Private Server? What's the benefit of that?
Yeah, well, it's mainly that allocated RAM. You know how much power you're going to provide. So, and it's really handy. I mean, if you've got sites that don't have caching on them, you get a long time to first byte, don't you, if you're underpowered? And there's the problem. At least you know what you're getting. With shared hosting, we know they're optimized for profit. So if you're with a company that, say, gets bought out by one of the big companies, they tend to, even if they were quite good when you joined them, and there was a company that we loved for ages that was shared hosting, but they got bought out and the power kept reducing all of the time. So it's got to the point where most people have needed to move. So I think the benefit is that knowing you've got that RAM, which is really important for their speed.
Do you have the capacity in some control panel or account or other? Do you usually get some granular control of that? Can you ramp it up and slide it down again?
Well, yeah, generally you're buying. Well, when I first got a VPS, it was with A2 hosting, and that was a set amount, and I could have moved it up to the next package. But of course, these days I'm using what we tend to call as cloud hosting services, which again is another kind of buzzword, really, I guess, for when we're describing the things like DigitalOcean and Volta and Google Cloud and Amazon and all those people. Yeah. So, but there you can kind of tend to step them up. A lot more progressively.
Right. Yeah. So, and do they? Well, maybe they are in some way self-healing, if you know what I mean. They will work out that there's a spike here. Let's just allocate you a bit more RAM and charge you a little bit more for these 7 minutes that it was being used and so on. I'm sure that kind of stuff is available. But like I say, I don't really have much experience of this because I'm on the one above that, where basically I get a box in a data center. And there's options here. You could have that entirely managed, so the box will be organized for you. They'll make sure that all the software is patched and so on and so forth. Not WordPress, but they'll make sure that Linux is up to date, and they'll make sure that Apache and all of these things, PHP versions and things like that, are maintained. I'm not on that. I'm on the do-it-yourself version, so I have to do all of that basically. But it works really well for me. I wouldn't advise it for anybody who isn't in it for the long game because it can cause problems. If things go wrong, it's entirely on your shoulders. But if you wanted complete control over everything, and you've got the depth of pocket to go for the level above mine, the dedicated server which is managed, that's great because you've got complete and utter control of every single thing.
Yeah. And this is you're one of the few people I know who's taken on that responsibility because it's a huge one, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. If things go wrong, then that's it. I've got to fix it. Luckily, software's so good these days. Linux is so rock solid. I'm using CentOS, which is kind of the Red Hat version, the free version of Red Hat Linux, and it's been tested over and over again. And I'm using tried and tested technologies like Apache and PHP and Nginx and things like that. And it very rarely goes wrong. Usually, the last major thing that went wrong was that the motherboard melted. A bit of it melted and so it needed to be swapped out. And in my situation, I can phone them up and they'll swap hardware out for me. That's fine, and they'll press the power button. Everything else is on me. But quickly worked out that it wasn't booting, and so they pulled it out and worked out that the motherboard needed exchanging, and they did that.
Wow. Yeah. I've progressed through the system, apart from I haven't gone to dedicated, but I'm getting as close as I can, because I started with shared GoDaddy, was quite happy with it. I tried Bluehost for a while, was less happy with them. And that was before they were taken over. I didn't get the power. So I think with shared hosting, there's a lot of luck here, because GoDaddy tends to take a knock-in all the time for its shared hosting. But in my case, on my particular shared server, I seem to get a lot of power. So I never moved for many, many years. I just thought, well, everybody else is telling me to get off it, but this is great. It's so much better than what I've tried. So, but then I moved up to virtual private server, and they had to manage that for me. I didn't understand. It wasn't such a great experience. And it was A2, and they are fabulous, I think, for their shared hosting. They have a great but they weren't so great on the server that I had that they were managing.
Okay.
But then I moved to, and I'm still the happiest with the new cloud hosting, being able to use that through DigitalOcean with Server Pilot, and also now with Cloudways. I think Cloudways is something unique. Actually.
You've got to explain this to me, because everybody talks about it. There's an awful lot of people that you and I both know discuss. Cloudways is just a word which comes up all the time, and DigitalOcean is a word which comes up all the time. And not being a user of them and having a setup which currently works for me, I don't really have the time to go out and look at all these fabulous new technologies. But I was a little bit confused. So could you explain how your setup works, what the options are? How did you choose things? Because you had a lot more choice. You could choose various things as you signed up, and I didn't quite know, why would I choose that one over this one, and so on.
Yeah, with Cloudways, well, it's effectively allows you to choose any of the big cloud hosting platforms out there. So DigitalOcean, Google, Amazon, I think Linode as well is another one. There's one more, I'm sure, but I can't remember what it is. So really, they are the service that installs your WordPress for you and gives you other things like Vanish caching systems and things like that does that for you. But I think Cloudways is quite unique, because if you was to go and say buy DigitalOcean separately, then it's up to you how you put and install WordPress and everything else. You can either go through a command line, and you can use some free software. I think Easy Engine is one, but that was above my skill level. Or you can use a service like ServerPress, which I've been using to manage that. But it gets a little bit more expensive, because if you want to install certificates with ServerPress, it's going to cost you $10 a per server that you use.
Wow.
Or Droplet. Yeah. So in the cheapest way to get it, of course, is something like DigitalOcean. Now you can get a 1 gig Droplet, as they call them, a server. That's RAM I'm talking about here. Yep. And it's only going to cost you $5 a month. But of course, if you need something to stick your certificates on, and you're not good with command line, and you don't understand that stuff, you're really going to need to get Server Pilot. I said ServerPress. Apologies, Server Pilot.
I wondered about that.
Yeah. And that's going to cost you $10. So it's going to cost you more than the actual hosting to be able to set things up. So there's a lot of balances to be had there, but I don't think you can beat it for somebody of my skill level to be able to get that kind of power.
Right. So you as you sign up to Cloudways, you pick from Amazon, Google, Linode, and all of those providers, and then obviously at the time where the website is provisioned, it puts it on their platform. But you don't have to worry about their platform. You just know that's where it is, but you don't have to interact with it in any way.
No, you just, you don't get a cPanel in the or Plesk or anything like that. You get their own setup. But the thing is, you can have multiple. So I could have a Google one, a DigitalOcean one, a Volta one if I want running. And I can actually pass copies of website between those different servers that are managed all in the one place, which is quite handy. And it really takes care.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. So it takes care of provisioning it to this place, but you can swap it to a different place whenever you like. And do you have sort of fine control over things like CPU and all of that?
No, you're kind of getting what you've signed up to. Of course, you can keep moving up the packages because
Okay.
all of them,
Yep. Yep.
all of them have their packages, so you can do that. I think if you go, because of course they're having to manage, and I don't quite know how this works. I haven't been with Cloudways as long as I have been with DigitalOcean on its own, so I don't know. But yeah, if you overstep their bandwidth amount, I guess they take care of charging you. The only thing about Cloudways, of course, it's a more expensive way of getting each of these cloud hosting services. The easiest way is to just buy them directly from them and install what you need yourself.
There's a company called Bitnami, and
Mm-hmm.
I've never used their stuff, but my understanding is that they provide little packages, ready to run applications. So they'll do something similar. They'll stick WordPress onto these platforms and take all of that. So then you, I think, pay Amazon directly or Google directly, and you pay them an additional monthly fee for just maintaining, for sticking WordPress on there and keeping it updated and things. I've not tried that, but that's possibly another option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds a little bit like that's working in the same way that Server Pilot
Yeah,
does.
possibly. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's balances here. I mean, if I've got a larger server with DigitalOcean, which is 4 gig, and of course it's cheaper for me to have that 4 gig server with Server Pilot than it would be for me to buy that same one from Cloudways, because they increase their charges. It's almost like doubling the charges each time, so it works out cheaper. So there's a balance to be had there. But I mean, Cloudways does make it easy for anybody without skill to be able to have a managed VPS effectively,
Okay.
And it's going to be, it's going to be cheaper than most of your shared. So that's why I think that the old traditions are dying a little bit now, because new things are replacing it, new ways of doing stuff. And you talked about one as well, didn't you? What was the company?
Oh,
Hardy
yes,
Press.
we had Hardy Press on a few weeks ago. Who've got, if you didn't hear that episode, they've got an entirely different model. I forget the pricing, so forgive me for that. But essentially, when you sign up with their service, they have your WordPress site in a Docker container, so a virtual machine. So imagine like a Windows desktop just on another computer, a bit like that, only Linux. And the Docker container contains your site, so it's whilst the Docker container is alive and on, you can fiddle with WordPress in the admin area, and then when you shut it down, all of WordPress just goes away, and they then crawl the site very quickly before they shut the container down and create flat HTML files. So all they're serving up to your customers and clients is just text-based HTML files. They've overcome problems with things like contact forms by using Contact Form 7, but it must be rocket fuel. It must be really fast, but it doesn't allow you to have really, really complicated interactive stuff that's calling things from the server all the time. But it's just a new and interesting idea. I think if you've got a simple brochure site and all you've got is a contact form and nothing much more than that, it really great idea. Worth checking out. I think it's like $10 a month or something. Whilst you talk, I'll go and find out.
Yeah, and there's another thing that I think is a cloudy area. When people talk, Flywheel's the one that I always remember. People love Flywheel, and it's quite expensive, but effectively, and I guess most people don't know that it is, or was at least, running off DigitalOcean. So in some ways, it's a very expensive way to get DigitalOcean, but people love it because it just matches what they need. They do the backups, take care of the security, have really excellent support. So they're worth paying that extra money.
Hardy Press is $5 a month. That's the cheapest package they offer, and
Wow.
they don't go into things like CPU and all of that because they don't really need to. They just say you get 500 megabytes of storage, which might be more than enough. Another thing that we haven't mentioned in all of this is things like email, because that can be a significant thing. Does your host provide you with an email account? Because if you take the domain wpbuilds.com, you would like to have some emails, I'm sure, coming to such and such at wpbuilds.com. And I think quite a lot of these platforms, they do claim to provide email. Whether or not that's a reliable service would be worth exploring. But my take on that always is to not combine hosting and emails for clients, and I try to persuade the clients to use a dedicated service like G Suite, Google's version. That's the one I always recommend because I use it myself and I know how good it is.
Yeah. Do you know what? I mean, this is really where, and this is a business problem for me at the moment, because I want people to come on just for my hosting and get their own email hosting. But a lot of the sites of the people we serve really have so little email that's going to come in from that really it's not a big problem to kind of stick your email on your hosting. And it's quite I create a burden, for some of our typical clients who may, if they were doing it themselves, who would have probably been happier with Bluehost and HostGator and stuff, who will give you unlimited everything apart from your RAM and CPU, but it'll be enough for what they need, small businesses.
So they'll give you unlimited email accounts and things like that.
I think, that's off the top of my head, but generally they do unlimited everything, disk space, and because they know that, they're strangling the amount of power that you have, that you're not going to use it up effectively. So, but I think that's the case with the email systems. You can create as many as you like, but they know their customers aren't going to do that.
No. My advice to my clients is always separate the two. And then certainly at the point of moving it, you've got one less thing to worry about, because migrating emails can be a right old faff.
Yes.
Especially if they've got, as one of my clients recently did, 80 gigabytes of emails.
Wow.
I know. That was fun. Right, are we done with that then?
Yeah, I think so. Did we cover? Yeah, so when we have these discussions, I guess we ought to have better discussions, didn't we, about the kind of support that we get from people, what type of support you get and what type of power. I think that if hosting conversations were more about that, we would all learn a lot more, I think.
Yeah, I think to some extent that's why I would rather pay a decent amount of money to a host, because support is, I think, essential, especially if you don't know what you're doing. It's quite nice to have somebody on chat. One of the companies I can mention, because I have got a few sites on there, is WP Engine, and they're not the cheapest by a long way, but their support is almost instantaneous. And I think that's possibly worth its weight in gold when things do go wrong. And we never got into things like backing up and stuff either, did we? Because a lot of the hosting companies will do that. We'll do that as a separate one, shall we?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Right, in which case, there we go. A little chat about hosting, very nice. And now we'll go and do the interview. Hello and welcome to the interview part of the podcast. Today, all the way from Melbourne in Australia, we have Elliot Condon. Now, Elliot is somebody that you've maybe not heard of directly, but he's certainly somebody that you've used his products, I'm sure, or at least come across them, because Elliot is the person behind ACF, or Advanced Custom Fields, which is a hugely runaway successful plugin for WordPress. So, hello, good morning, good evening. What time is it?
Nathan, hi. It's evening here.
Oh, it's evening.
It's evening.
Yeah.
It's past dinner. It's 7:35.
I should say you're being very good, because it's tea time on a Friday. So by all rights, you should be knocking off and going to the pub. But here you are talking to me.
It's Friday night here, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's a raging Friday night to me, clearly. But I'm happy to chat.
Oh, thank you.
This is good.
Yeah, it's great. We were talking a little bit before we started recording them, and we thought it might be quite nice in the light of a few podcasts that I did recently, where we had lots of favourable comments when we spent a little bit of time just talking to the person about the person and their history and heritage. So we're going to take that tack. We'll talk about ACF later. But so the first 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it turns into, is just going to be having a chat to Elliot about his life. So are you from Melbourne originally? Were you born in that part of the world, or what?
Yeah, in this part of the world, definitely, but not in Melbourne City. I actually grew up down the coast, down in Victoria, Australia, down in the Surf Coast, about 2 hours south of Melbourne, in a little town called Aireys Inlet, which is a tourist town. It's in between Anglesey and Lorne, near Torquay as well, on the Great Ocean Road. So definitely a beautiful place of the world to grow up.
Those names are so familiar to me because they are, every single one of those that you've just mentioned. I think apart from maybe not Lorne, has an equivalent in the UK, but I bet they're not quite as nice as the Australian equivalent.
It's pretty nice down there. It's pretty picturesque. It's good.
Did you have an interest in this side of things? Like, were you, when you were at school and a young child, were you kind of the obsessive coding type, if you know what I mean? Were you a mathematical child, or did you fall into this sort of stuff at a much later date?
Yeah, I think I never had a grasp on programming as a kid, but I think I had all the other parts were working. So definitely an interest in mathematics and puzzle solving and problem solving, and computer games.
Yeah, I was a big fan of all of the above. I really enjoyed my maths lessons, and I didn't really enjoy reading books unless they had a non-fiction side to them, except Lord of the Rings, a notable exception, which I obsessed about. Yeah. Really enjoyed that. But so growing up I'm going to say, do you have a sort of wider family? Are you part of a bigger network, brothers and sisters and all of that?
Just the one brother, a pretty small family. And Aries Inlet also is somewhat isolated. It's a small town. There's maybe only now it's quite a lot bigger, but at the time maybe 1,000 people lived there.
Oh, okay.
So school was pretty small. I was actually the only boy in my year.
Whoa!
In primary school.
Whoa, that is small.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It was small. There was maybe 10 girls in my year. I was the only boy in the last, year 6 over here is the last year in primary school.
Man alive.
And I think, it was fun. There was only maybe 4 of us, 4 guys, and one by one, they kind of moved off to other schools towards the end, and it was just me.
When I was at school, there wasn't really. I mean, what am I? I'm like 40 something. I don't know. Let's say I'm 43 or 4. That's rubbish, isn't it? There was this one token computer, and the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. I don't know quite how all this happened, but they created this computer called a BBC, and every school had one. I presume they were given away, but they were always locked in a cupboard. And the BBC computer would come out on its trolley periodically, and the teacher would, press the keys, and everything wouldn't work because they had no idea how to use it. So computers to me were an enigma. We never got sight of any of those until I was much older. Is that the same for you, or did you get your hands on them at an early age?
Yeah, we had computers, and growing up, we also had an uncle who was great with computing and would yearly upgrade his rig, and we got the hand-me-down.
Oh, nice.
And he was right into gaming as well. So we had, a kind of a second-hand computer every year or two with, and this is going back to like B drive discs and A drive discs of games.
Yep.
Maybe, there would have been CDs as well by the end of that.
We had the big floppy thing. Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and also at school we did have computers in the last couple of years. Those classic white cream colored plastic boxes with a turbo button that no one knew what the turbo button does on these things. Do you know what the turbo button does?
No. In my experience of computers was this BBC thing at school, but that was in an era when nobody had a computer. Literally nobody that I knew, except this one rich kid that nobody really liked, and I knew his dad had a Commodore PET. But we never got to see it. But this apocryphal computer that lived in a house somewhere in the town. But then along came the Commodore computers. There was the Commodore VIC-20, followed closely by the Commodore 64. And they were the like the prestige computer that every kid wanted because they had like really nice sound and they had fairly good graphics and 64K of memory. 64K. Just imagine that nowadays. You wouldn't even fit like a quarter of one Word document on that. But the more normal kids, if you like, me and my family, we had a ZX Spectrum, which was made by a company called Sinclair, and it was a computer. It was about the size of 2 pieces of toast. And basically it was a bit rubbish, but it was fun. You had loads of little games for it. So what computer specifically do you remember having, and what game? I want to know the exact names of the games.
The games, I don't remember what the computers were. I was probably too young, but they were Windows builds at that time. They were Windows 95. And all that stands out is that at one stage it was on the A drive discs. When we had this hand-me-down computer, we didn't boot into Windows. We booted into this other operating system, or whatever it was, a directory manager called Xtree Gold.
Ooh.
And I do have fond memories of that because it was essentially a DOS interface, tree directory looking thing that we could just go in and select the game. But what were the games? That's a really good question. They would have been so basic. They would have been just odd. Oh, actually, there was a great game that I did play called... I'm going to look this up in the background, but it was this kind of 2D physics game where you would use fans and they'd blow balls onto a switch and something else would happen.
So puzzles.
I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, no, you go for it.
Wow, I'm reliving the past.
While you look it up, I'll tell everybody what I played because I loved my computer. It was, like I said, it was a ZX Spectrum, and I played games, such thrilling games as Manic Miner, Night Law. There was absolutely loads of them. There was Penetrator, which was, you had to sort of like guide this spaceship through. There were obstacles at top and at bottom, and you had to guide it through. Honestly, if you showed that game to my children, they would literally wet themselves with how pathetic it was. And yet at the time, unbelievable. Unfortunately for me, I kind of lost my interest in computer games, and to some extent with computers altogether, and then kind of went away from it all, and then came back to it. With kids nowadays, I don't know if you have a similar setup in Australia, but there's a real strong push to get kids into coding. I think the government in this country have decided that this is a strength of our country. You know, we do produce quite a lot of people producing good code, and you know it's a good industry for the UK. So there's a lot of initiatives now trying to get the children to learn to code. And my children who are in primary school, they actually have coding classes. It's part of the curriculum. Do you know if kids in Australia do that stuff?
Definitely. Nieces and nephews.
Yep.
I've seen they do robotics.
Nice.
They program these robots, and they build the robots, and they program them to do stuff.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be fun to be growing up at the moment? I mean, I say that. Maybe it's not as fun as it seems, but that part of it,
very cool.
Sounds amazing.
There's been a project from out of the UK, but it's gone global. This Raspberry Pi thing where you can buy this credit card sized computer basically, and it's my children have got one and play with it on a regular basis. And there's an awful lot of things that are going on with it as well. You know, little attachments that you can buy for it. Anyway, we've sort of gone into a real tangent there. So let's drag it back to you. So you've grown up a little bit. You're a little bit older. When was the first? Can you remember or tell us about the first moment where you sat down at a computer and thought, I'm going to do this for a living?
Well, the earliest I can think of, I mean, maybe at this point I was definitely not thinking about a living, but in high school, we did have an IT class, and we were playing around with Flash.
Oh.
So it wasn't so much programming at that stage, it was just little animations, but anything creative really took a hold of me in high school. So I loved art classes and graphics classes. And I really enjoyed, I think in a lot of my spare time, I was making Flash animations and little Flash games.
Right.
Because that was really popular. That was what was happening when I was growing up. And it was just finish school, come home, play RuneScape, but then also check out, there was a couple of websites that were just Flash website games or Flash games.
Yeah.
And Yeah, so I would have played around just trying to make my own.
Okay.
Um,
I think it's
yeah, so
well, I was just going to say, I think it is a really exciting time for children. You know, lots and lots of sort of stuff going on, and the fact that you mention art and things. I wasn't the kind of child that made the connection with code
right.
being artistic until I was a lot older. And then one day I distinctly remember the moment where I suddenly thought, actually, this is akin to making a painting. The skills that I require. There's a lot more logic in it, but once you've got over that initial hurdle and you've made something work and you've fought through it all, there's that distinct moment of this is a beautiful thing that I'm doing here. I really like it on an artistic level.
Yeah, it's definitely using the same part of the brain, isn't it? Because you're
Yeah,
creating something that doesn't exist.
yeah.
Um, yeah, which is, I mean, that's really quite cool, isn't it? There is definitely a connection. And especially with web development, there's a huge overlap between the actual design of the website and feedback design, the user interface and the user experience. So I think there's a big kind of overlap now,
Yeah.
especially
And also to have to be able to
between the
do
two.
something new and innovate something for the first time requires those exact same skills, I think, as an artist does. And we seem to have there seems to be a real sort of like nerd mentality in the UK. That is to say that there are the kids who do art, and then there's the kids who do sort of maths and sciencey sort of things.
Right.
And the two don't seem to mix too well. I could be wrong about that. That just seems to be my impression of it. But it's a shame because I feel that there's such an overlap. And obviously WordPress, code is poetry, kind of sums that up really well. Anyway, let's move on a bit. We've been talking now for about a quarter of an hour. That was really fun. Thanks for that. It was a real insight into your life. Let's talk about ACF for a bit.
Shall we?
Yeah, okay. First of all, if you haven't used ACF, it's a plugin released by Elliot. There's a considerably cool free version, and then there's also ACF Pro, which adds a few features on top, which we might get onto in a little while. Do you want to explain on a high level what its core purpose is, and perhaps even tell us why you built it? What was wrong with WordPress that needed mending?
Oh, yeah, we should definitely talk about that. But let's get into, I'm happy to talk about what ACF is. I think I could sum up some words. ACF is a WordPress plugin that provides you the tools and allows you to customize the fields on a WordPress edit screen. So this is pretty similar to maybe a contact form plugin, or even bigger picture outside of WordPress. A subscription sign-up form, anything that allows you to customize form input fields. And so when you're in WordPress and you're creating a blog post, that post already actually has fields on the page. You've got a title and you've got content. Although it's only two fields, these are content fields for that post object. And so ACF allows you to customize those and also add new ones to the post. So you can, get quite artistic actually and redesign the entire edit screen with all of these new input fields of all different sorts, all different types as well.
Well, WordPress has sort of got to the point recently, especially with things like page builders. And also I think it's got a heritage of people just using the text editor to do absolutely everything. So they'll drop a ton of shortcodes in there and they'll try to make that one field, if you like, do absolutely everything, which is exactly what you're trying to fix. So you can just drop in, what kind of field options have you got? So by default you get the content, if you like, in the text area. You get the title. What other things can we then add with ACF to our post type?
Yeah, so with ACF, you've got basic HTML input fields, things like just text fields, text area fields, number fields. But then you've got some more content-based fields. You've obviously got the WYSIWYG field, which is the WordPress content editor as it stands today, which is a tiny mice JavaScript editor. You've then got image fields, file fields for uploading attachments. You've also got choice-based fields like select elements, checkbox radio fields, true-false toggle switches. Then there's relational fields for selecting existing content or linking to existing content. So there's the link field, post object field, relationship field, taxonomy, and user. I'm actually having a look at these on my screen, which is quite handy. I'm just kind of going through them.
It's the sort. You've probably been working with it for so long, you've forgotten what's on there.
Exactly. I know. I need to look. I need to cheat right now, so I am looking. There's some more interactive jQuery based fields, so things like Google Maps, date time pickers, color pickers, and then there's some really interesting fields for repeating or creating groups of fields. And then so we start getting into things like the repeater field and the flexible content field, which basically allow you to create little repeatable areas of subfields. And you can get very creative with these. You can basically, I don't think I've ever seen a website that cannot be content managed with ACF.
Yeah, I completely agree.
There's basically just no scenario. It would have to be an amazing website to complain about ACF's interface.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I suppose if you've not been using WordPress for very long and you're thinking, well, what's wrong with the WordPress post type, or what's wrong with the page post type and what have you? Why do I need other things? And I think you just have to think outside the box a little bit. An example that I built recently with ACF was a real estate website. So rather than try to get every single thing about a house into the text area, you simply create a field for uploading images, and then the client, in my case, a real estate agent, can just upload the images, and then there might be a text field where they might want to put the number of rooms and the names of the rooms and all of that kind of stuff. And very, very quickly, I mean really quickly, it takes seconds with your plugin. It's brilliant. You can just add these fields and tell it, okay, shove those on this post type, the house post type. And but the sort of I suppose the difficulty with ACF, that's the wrong word, but your plugin is specifically designed to create the fields, not to then output those fields. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah, it's fair enough to say. So ACF is a developer tool. It's built for developers. So it's expected that you know how to customize your theme code.
Yep.
It was designed in mind to solve a problem at the time when I was building it, to solve a problem in the workflow and the building process of a typical agency website, where the client goes to a graphic design agency who designs this pretty website and then passes that on to a web development agency, who then has to bring that design to life. And that design is complicated. There's lots of areas all over the screen that you need to be able to edit content, and there's just no way you could do that with shortcodes, because these areas of content extend well outside of the, in quotes, content area. So technically, yes, it could be a hurdle, but I actually see it as a really good thing. That ACF is definitely a developer tool.
Yep.
And when you were just previously talking, I was thinking, I mean, why use ACF? Yeah, sure, we can create all these fields. That's good. But why are we doing that? The beauty of separating your content entry into individual fields is so the data is stored separately.
Good point.
Like little Lego blocks in the database. This is a really good thing because you can then pull those Lego blocks out and put them anywhere you want.
Good
because
point.
Using shortcodes is great. Yeah, shortcodes are great for modifying and manipulating the layout within the, in quotes, content area. But outside of that content area, you have no way of customizing or modifying the content. And so this is the problem that ACF solves. It allows you to both easily input the data, but then secondly, to extract that data. So with really, really easy functions, you can load that data back out. And and render your own HTML and
Yeah.
have full control
So
over the end result.
if you're not using fields and you're just using the WYSI wig editor, the text editor, you don't really get any of that. You just simply get to splurge it all out in one big lump, and whatever the lump is that you put in is the lump that you're going to get out. Whereas if you put in 15 fields, you might only need to display 2 of them, and you can repurpose those other fields in all sorts of other interesting ways. Like you might put them on the display so that the client who's updating this website could see some of these fields, and the end users, in my case the people buying houses, don't see those fields. So there might be internal things and external things, and certain images might be seen. But the possibilities are literally endless. And it's a hard sell, isn't it? Because it's difficult to explain it, but it's very easy to see the purpose of it when you actually use it.
Yeah, I think that if you're starting off with WordPress and you're a web developer, you're going to come across this issue straight away on day one. You're going to, how do I allow my client to safely edit this content, and how do I get that content into the theme? That's the first way you'll find ACF. But if you're not programming on day one, it might seem a little bit trickier to come across ACF, but it is easy to use. There's lots of documentation. We've got lots of help available. It's not rocket science to edit a theme, to edit HTML. I wouldn't ask everyone to edit HTML. I always believe in hiring a professional to do that kind of stuff. But if you are a bit of a DIYer, or you fancy yourself as a good learner, a quick learner, HTML, it's not rocket science.
Nope.
It is. It's very, very. What's the word? What's a good word to say what HTML is?
Straightforward.
It is quite straightforward. Yeah.
The other nice thing I think that's come over the horizon to save loads of time for all of us is, of course, something that I'm really keen on. I'm really bullish about page builders and their ability to just dramatically take the time it takes for somebody like me to create websites for clients, just so much faster. And there's lots and lots of lovely integrations with these page builders. In my case, being a big proponent of Beaver Builder, those guys did quite a lot of work to literally by clicking a button and copying and pasting the name of a field, which ACF provides for you on the back end. You're done. You can display literally anything you want. So if what we've just said, and Elliot's saying learn HTML, there are other more sort of gooey ways of doing it and getting a beautiful display trivially, but potentially not your. Would you say that's not your target audience, or are you embracing that more as time goes on? Are you getting into like the page builder and the way that that WordPress seems to be moving in that direction?
I wouldn't say it's my target audience,
okay,
but I'm definitely embracing.
Yeah.
I'm embracing anything with WordPress, and I'm so impressed with what page builders are doing now. Not only do they look beautiful, but they work. They really work.
They really work. I think we're at this defining moment with them where there's so many people using them now. Certainly in my experience, I mean, I know there's a lot of people who think that it's not the way, it's not the right way of doing it, and it's not the WordPress way and all of that kind of stuff. But I think there's enough people using them now that there's a real ecosystem of stuff around them. So, you can buy, or even just for free, download whole template libraries just to give you a leg up. So if you want a section which builds this kind of layout, here's where a map might go. And, oh, look, I could drop my ACF field into that map section. And here's how a beautiful header might look. I'll drop my title in there from ACF, or my text field or whatever. I just see that as a really the way it's all going. And then, of course, the elephant in the room that we haven't mentioned yet is Gutenberg. Have you seen that, played with that, had any experience of it at all?
All the above.
Good.
All the above. Quite involved. Obviously, there's quite a responsibility from my end.
Yep.
To reassure the public
that
ACF is going to continue working, and we're integrating with Gutenberg, and the sky will not fall. There has been a little bit of panic, hasn't there? There's been a little bit
of I think a lot of people are just
afraid
of
worry
of that exact moment. They're afraid of that one time when they click the button to update to 5.0. But from everything that I've seen, I don't think we need to worry too much. And of course, there's ways to mitigate that. You can disable it if it's really not your bag. Do you want to? Are you able to tell us any of the fun stuff that's coming around from Gutenberg, or is that something you want to just keep until Gutenberg's live and kicking?
I will hint at the fact that I've added in some compatibility with Gutenberg, some really interesting compatibility that will leverage all the cool stuff that Gutenberg can do and all the cool stuff that ACF currently does. But I won't say exactly what it is just yet until the Gutenberg project is a bit more positively embraced by the development community.
Does somebody like you, do you communicate directly? Because your livelihood is inextricably linked to WordPress, and there's a seismic change with Gutenberg coming along. Do you sort of try to stay in with those communities? Do you keep abreast on a Slack channel or some way, or do you just see the press releases and the things that come out of make.wordpress.org? Or do you talk to the people involved in Gutenberg?
A bit of everything. I'm not much. I don't really go on Slack. I'm a bit scared of what would happen if I went on Slack. I don't think I'd get any work done. So I stay away from it. But I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time, and Twitter is such a great resource for web developers.
Right.
And there's just everyone is writing all these amazing blog posts. There's such good content, and Twitter is just delivering it straight to me. So there's a lot that gets published about Gutenberg every day. Right.
I mean, there really is, isn't there? You'd have to have your eyes shut and your ears closed to not realise what's going on. But that's good. I mean, it's nice. It's reassuring because certainly, I would say every single person that I know in the WordPress space. Let me see if that's right. I think it's fair to say almost every single person that I know in the WordPress space uses your product. And so that's a sort of like a burden to bear, isn't it? You don't want to screw things up. You've got a history of doing it right.
I like to think so. I think I've got a history of doing things slowly, and I think that's really worked out for me. I think I've never been on the forefront of jumping on the latest idea.
Nope.
Kind of had that little bit of hesitation and maybe wait 6 months.
Those words are.
And I think that's.
I was just going to say those words are absolutely music to my ears. I've never. I choose. I'm a consumer of plugins. If possible, if I can find a route to do it myself, I'll do that. But a lot of the things that I need to do are plugin based, and that's a massive criteria for me. Is that there's a history of somebody in there. Not trying to add every feature in as soon as it's possible and break things. I want stability over features every single time.
Yeah, I think everyone does.
Yeah.
And I think as ACF grows bigger and bigger, there's more and more responsibility to obviously make sure that is stable across the board. That everything works and it works well.
Yep. Do you?
I think that's just always been my style. I've never really been on the forefront. It took me years to even pre-compile CSS. I was handwriting the full CSS for the non-developers out there. CSS is for styling the HTML.
Yep.
And we got just the best tools in the last 5 years. We got Less and Sass. And some other stuff, but for compiling, and we could write the same amount of code in maybe half the time.
Yep.
And I love it now, but for years I didn't use it. I thought it was just a buzzword. I thought it was just a. Well, maybe I was a bit out of touch a couple of years ago.
You don't need to use it, do you? But it definitely saves you a lot of time, and anything that saves you time is a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, and it's nice to hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were, because Do you have any?
There's some really cool stuff coming. There's some really cool Gutenberg stuff coming.
Yeah.
But the good thing is that ACF, it kind of exists outside of the scope of what Gutenberg is, because Gutenberg is bringing a new content editor for pages and posts. And ACF has always sat outside of the content editing area. It's always been its own. These are meta boxes on the page. And Gutenberg, they're trying to integrate meta boxes into the content. But I'm a strong advocate for they are separate for a reason. There's really no point to merge the two together. It's basically redesigning the wheel. I mean, meta boxes are a beautiful thing. I hope that all the other developers out there agree. They actually are really what's the word? Oh, there's such a good word that I'm thinking of.
Tremendous.
They're a really good solution.
Yeah, go with that.
There is a word that just says this perfectly, and Adam Savage used it the other day on one of his YouTube shows. I'll think of it later. But anyway, metaboxes are a good thing, and ACF will continue to use them.
Oh, good. Oh, well, that's an interesting thing to know as well. Do you know how many people? Because we were talking a little while ago about just how everybody that I know uses it, and I'm just interested to know. I mean, I'm on the WordPress.org repo, and it's WordPress.org/plugins/advanced-custom-fields. And it's not very granular, is it? I know they try to improve these things all the time, but the all it says is active installations 1+ million. That's such a big number.
It's a bit vague, isn't it?
No, but it's so big. It doesn't matter how vague it is. That's a lot of people. Do you know what the increment is? Does that go up to like 2 million, or does that cover anything less than 10 million, or what?
I suspect that they're downplaying that number a little bit. I've got a good feeling it's a lot bigger than that.
Oh my lord! Yeah, you really can't break anything.
From what I know from WordPress's side, it goes up in increments of 1. So if you get to 2 million, that will change to 2+ million.
Okay. So it could be 1,199,994, and it'd still say 1 million. Okay, so you think it's closer to 2 than 1? That's interesting.
I think it's a bit beyond 2 as well.
That really is interesting. I mean, that's an amazing thought that you can have a bolt-on to a CMS with over 2 million, a 2 million into, and the ratings. Good grief! Look at that. I mean, it's got close to 1,000. Oh no, it's got 982 5-star ratings. That's pretty tremendous. And then you've always got
982.
Yeah, that's dangerously close to 1,000, isn't it?
How many do we need? How many more do we need?
18 to get
18.
That's all you need. If there's anybody listening
please
to this
have
podcast,
18
there's 18 people. Just go and review it 5 stars. Do you know what? I bet. I mean, you've got over 2 million, we think, people using it, and 982 of them, which is the absolute lion's share of the reviews. I mean, the others they can't even present a percentage point, nowhere near. That's an incredible testament. That is a solid score. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
I think for a free plugin, though, it's just solves so much. And I mean, ACF was always meant to be a free plugin. I do have the pro version now, and that is my full-time job, which is amazing. I absolutely love it. But actually, when I made ACF, I had no idea that this could be a full-time job, that this could generate salary. So it always has and always will be a free plugin. Obviously, there's professional features because I need to make a living out of this. But yeah, I think I've always put a lot of effort into the free plugin.
The free plugin is basically everything you kind of need. But do you want to dwell? Because that is interesting. You know, if there's any people on here who've installed the free, well, obviously there will be who've installed the free version. Do you want to just elucidate what it is that the pro version, what you get that's extra?
Yeah, so the pro version has 5 new features. 4 of them being new field types. So in those field types, there is, as previously mentioned, there was that repeater field and flexible content field.
Which, by the way, is the best invention ever.
Thank you.
That's really good.
The repeater field, I'll talk about the repeater field in a second, because that's got a little bit of history. That's kind of an interesting story.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but so the repeat field, the flexible content field, the gallery field, and the clone field, they're all for taking that admin UI to the next level, to giving your client these amazing and endless possibilities of inputting content safely and smartly. That 5th feature is called the options page, which allows you to create new admin pages just on the fly, which is cool. Because WordPress doesn't actually give you a way to create global options data.
No.
I mean, it gives us a table in the database called WP options, and it's global data, and we all save and load to it, and you can use it. You know, for example, a header image would get saved to the options table because it's used everywhere. It's not related to a single post. And so, the options page, which I love, that's one of my favorite things because it's just so elegant.
Elegant.
That is the word I was thinking.
There you go.
It's an elegant solution.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that says such. I like that. The options page, you can create new admin pages on the fly with a very small amount of code.
Nice.
And then set your field groups up to appear there. So it's great for, having, header and footer are 2 really quick and easy pages that you could set up. And, the footer you could set up some columns for content editors, and maybe you could have your social information in there as well that you could reuse all over the place in your website.
I haven't really explored the options page. I'm going to, as soon as we finish this, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and explore that.
The options page, I like the options page because I like when I'm writing code and things talk to things. That's blows my mind and is the most satisfying part of my job, when I can create 2 cogs and that they start talking together. So the options page can start talking to all the other fields. And I never told the options page to talk to a specific field, but it knows the language. So it just talks to this bigger brain that understands how fields work, and it will create the inputs on them. And I think that's really cool when you kind of sit back. Well, creating a tool actually in general is quite amazing because every website uses ACF differently, and I never programmed the end result. I just programmed the tool.
And that's why that is why it's so popular, isn't it? Because everybody can get a hook into it and spit out what they want in whatever way they want. And everything that you've just said kind of harks back to what we were saying about 20 minutes ago. This idea that code is beautiful and poetic and elegant, as you just described it. It feels like that, doesn't it? And it sounds like you've had some sort. I'm going to use another E word, a nice epiphany when you sort of put some of this stuff together, the options pages, and things start communicating in ways that you didn't really expect or contrive. Yeah, that's really nice. You were going to talk about the repeater field. You said there was a nice story there.
Yes, let's do that. So this actually takes us way back. And I looked this up. I looked up the timelines. This is a cool thing about the tools that we have these days for managing repositories and file history, is that I could actually go back and see date stamps for everything that I'd ever done, which was cool.
Ah, nice.
So we're going to take a little trip back 7 years ago to 2011. 2011, which 2011 was a big year. I was looking through the tagged versions of ACF, and I released 3 major versions in 1 year.
Good going.
I mean, I don't know how much I was working. I was clearly not sleeping.
Too much coffee.
Too much coffee. My God, I was moving fast. That was for sure. So we're going back to 2011. I was freelancing at the time, building some websites, and there was a custom field plugin that already existed. I can't remember the name of it. It worked. It didn't look pretty, and it was difficult to use. And so it didn't have repeatable data.
Right.
And I was building this website, and this website had a homepage slider, and I needed a way for the client to change all the images and text for the slider. And I think I had it set up that it was just 3 slides, and that's it.
Yep.
You couldn't have any more, couldn't have any less. And I thought, God, wouldn't it be nice if you could just create a slide, and then just the client could just log in and add another slide or delete a slide whenever she wanted, and not just specific to a slider, but anything that was repeatable. I mean, much content. We were really actually, the designs at the time were really grid heavy. Grids were really in. We loved boxing in content a while ago. And so I actually built a plugin called Custom Field Matrix. So I was obviously using this other custom field plugin for all of the normal custom field stuff, which ACF now does. And I built this custom field matrix plugin just to take care of this repeatable concept. And it was super basic. It only had an image field and a text field, but that was enough for me to create sliders, because I could create an image and then a text field for an alt tag and a text field for a title, and actually got by with that. That was quite good. I was using it on a couple of websites, and I decided to put it up on the WordPress plugins page. And that got a lot of feedback. People loved it. People started using it and couldn't believe how amazing this was to repeat data. It kind of didn't exist. Or if it did exist, I just wasn't aware of it, and I was a bit ignorant and just made my own thing.
Wow, it's good. Why not? Yeah.
Maybe I should have been contributing to something else. I don't know. Someone will tell me. And so I worked on Custom Field Matrix for a little while. This is before I came up with ACF, and it was in this development of Custom Field Matrix that I realized I was designing a very niche part of a bigger picture, and that bigger picture is ACF. That bigger picture is the fact that you can create custom fields on the fly of all different sorts. So that field matrix plugin, so it only had an image field, a text field, and you could repeat them. And I kind of figured, well, maybe there's this parent plugin that handles all the fields, but then there's this matrix thing as a kind of add-on.
Right.
So this is where the whole idea of ACF actually got born. So I kind of parked the matrix field plugin, and I started work on ACF. And so that began in 2011. And in that same year, I'd somehow pumped out 3 major versions, which were pretty feature packed. I was looking through the changelog of these, and I added in a lot. I mean, the code is horrible. My God, it's appalling. It's beyond appalling. I don't know how
I guess that's a cross every person like you has to bear, staring at what you did 10 years ago or 7 years ago, and it probably even what you did last year. You'd be, appalled.
If there's any developers listening, go and find your oldest repository and go look at your code from as far back as you can. I think...
Sorry. It was a bit of lag there, and it went silent. Then suddenly it didn't. So I'm sorry. It sounds like I interrupted you there.
Okay.
Do you, just changing tack a little bit, you sound like you're like really grateful about the opportunity that WordPress has given to you. And, you've made your career out of selling. It's amazing even to say it, isn't it? You're selling an add-on to a plugin to a free CMS, and it's that's your living. You give away a huge amount for free on top of something else which is free, and you add a few more extra bits, and that's the way you make your living. Do you consider that to be a bit of luck? Were you in the right place at the right time? What's your thoughts on it? Do you wake up and sort of feel, boy, I am doing so well here, it's lovely?
I'm definitely thankful. I mean, the position that I am in at the moment is so strange, but I love it. I love working on this project so much. I've kind of forgotten the exact question you just asked.
Well, it was really about what your thoughts are about your position, really, and about how you what stance you take. Do you see yourself as somebody that's sort of grinded to get it, or do you feel like that was a bit of luck? Because from the story that you've just told, the story that you've just told, it feels like you were the perfect person in the right place at the right time. Because things like Drupal, which I was a big user of, people were doing this in the time that you were creating ACF, and yet the most popular system for producing web content since it came around really has been WordPress, and yet nobody was really doing what you were doing at that exact time, or if they were, it faded away, and your one has your idea has risen to the top.
Yes, definitely right place at the right time. But I mean, I at the time was using this other custom field plugin, and I think there were a few. So there were a few custom field plugins out there, but they were ugly. They were nasty to use. They were really hacked together, and it wasn't a polished product. And handing that over to a client was sometimes embarrassing. Because it really made. I mean, WordPress didn't even look that professional 7 years ago.
No, not like
it looked slightly childlike. And that just made it, a bit harder to hand that over to client, because the front end of these websites were beautiful. I mean, some of the designs that were getting done, and still are, obviously, but back then was still very impressive. And I was using WordPress just because I'd stumbled upon that. And it was, I never really fought WordPress as the CMS of choice. I never really spent any time with Joomla or Drupal, but obviously I knew about them. But I think WordPress has had a bit of buzz, and the right people were talking to me at the right time for me to just dive into it.
Man alive, it could have gone in any direction, couldn't it? You did. It sounds like everything, the stars aligned, and you built. It could have,
but
built
I
the
think
right thing.
I've always been super passionate about this project, and I think, I mean, looking at how much work I put in 2011, I wanted to make the best thing possible. I wanted to make something that looked even better than WordPress did. And I think people responded really positively to that, and they kind of jumped ship over to ACF straight away.
Do you do the way the plugin looks on the back end, the ability to add fields? I must say, you've done a stellar job. It looks nice. It's so easy to use. There's nothing complex about it. I think you really shouldn't be involved in any way, shape, or form with managing websites if you can't use ACF. Did you? Is that all your work, or did you at any point step away and let somebody else have a set of eyes on it, or was that all your thoughts?
It's all mine. I've got a real problem with controlling everything. And when it comes to my work. This has just been my natural 7-year progression of interface design. I'm really happy with where it is at the moment. But I'm looking forward to, in the future, branching out, maybe getting in touch with some designers and kind of pushing it a little bit into the future.
Okay. A little hint, perhaps. Who knows?
Little hint. But I mean, at the same time, it has to sit inside of WordPress. And good thing that WordPress's design has come such a long way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite easy to sit inside. I don't want my plugin to ever look third party. I always want it to look first party.
Yeah.
But obviously with its own little stylings, but I want it to look like it's meant to be in here from the start.
We thank you from the bottom of our hearts, every single one of the people that listens to this podcast. They'll realise how clever your stuff is and how well put together it is. And you alluded a minute ago to the fact that you like to control this thing. Have you been responsible in its 7-year journey for utterly everything, or have you ever stepped back and let anybody have a look and a play and a tinker and alter anything?
I won't say that I've controlled everything, but I'll say close to. There's obviously some scenarios where people have approached me with pull requests of a feature that they want to put in, and I see it and I go, gee, this is actually fantastic. It's nice and small, and I can just add that in. So yeah, some of the features are from the community, which is amazing. But design and development, I've really had this under my own fingers since day one.
Good on
which
you.
is kind of cool.
Yeah.
The one thing I do need help with is support. Is supporting a plugin, which is such a huge part of selling a digital product online, or even a physical product online, is providing that support for your customers. And so I do have some help.
Yeah. Do you have are they based in your time zone, or do you have a few dotted around, shall we say?
Yeah. I have got some local developers in Australia, which is great, some friends. They do some support work. I also hire a local company, and they have agents all across the world. So that helps with the time zone.
Yep.
And they manage their team, so that's kind of a little bit disconnected from my day-to-day. But gee, they do such a good job, because we get a lot of support requests.
I'm sure you do. I mean, you don't get nearly, let's say over 2 million people using the product without getting a burden of support tickets to go with it. With your Pro add-on, one thing that I do want to mention, because I think this is a thing which is happening in WordPress in general, is we seem to be moving away from this one price for all time, a lifetime deal, and yet you're currently you're sticking to that pricing. It's very fair. You have it's more than fair. It's ridiculous, frankly. You've got a personal license which enables you to have one site, and that's $25 Australian. Am I right in saying the Australian dollar is worth 0 point something of a US dollar?
Yes, so you are right. I think it's 0.7 or 0.8 around there.
Okay, so it's about $18-ish, and the developer one is $100, which takes you up to unlimited, so $79, $80 US, something like that. Is this a pricing structure that you're going to maintain, or do you have any plans to make that more subscription based?
I mean, it's worked for me up until now. I think I've been following the Apple iTunes, the App Store mentality, which is just you buy the app for 99 cents, but if you sell 1 million of them, well, then there's your $1 million. So I think for a long time, I've been more focused on lots of multiple sales at affordable rates. Am I looking to change it? I'm not actively looking to change it, but at the same time, this year I'm taking some big steps towards expanding ACF with new and more employees so that we can achieve more. And look, it may be as a result that we do need to actually add in some kind of recurring yearly fee, because it's so much more than just some code now. I mean, back in the day, it just used to be, well, here's your code. Now we have to provide a website that stays on 99.99% of the time with updated documentation daily. We also need an update service to roll updates out to everyone's website so that no one's website ever breaks during update. We also need a huge support team to help everyone out. So look, the costs of running the business are definitely going up. So potentially there may need to be some recurring fee in the future. But I don't think that won't be anytime soon. I don't think.
What? You'd have to be really churlish to try and pick holes in that argument. I think it's amazing that you've managed to keep it going for this long. I mean, WordPress being what it is and its enormous reach means that you've got a huge audience. But, like you said, there's mouths to feed, there's websites to maintain, there's servers to pay for.
There are.
It's got, and it's got to be done. And I think anybody in the future who doesn't snag this deal will be more than happy to part with their yearly fee, or even if you go for a fee for a point release or something like that. Yeah, fair enough. Well, I would just like to say a great big thank you. That was a nice chat, a real blend of like computer games from the early childhood right through to a good long chat about ACF. It was very pleasant indeed. Where I don't know if you're the kind of person that likes to share their Twitter handle or their email address or any of that stuff, but if you want to go on a little promotional spree for the next minute, feel free. Tell us where you are and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. Definitely hit me up on Twitter. My personal account is just at Elliot Condon, and the ACF account is WP_ACF, which if you're interested in the plugin, just definitely follow, because we obviously post tweets about our blog posts and upcoming versions, which is quite a handy way of letting you guys know when good things are on their way.
Okay. So just from me, one last thing. What you want to do really is check out Advanced Custom Fields at advanced, no spaces, all lowercase, customfields.com. And if you go to /pro, then you're going to find out how you can assist Elliot in the future with his product and, enable him to make it better and hire those extra staff that he's just alluded to. And if you haven't used ACF, seriously look at it, because it's going to enable you to do a whole lot more for a very, very small learning curve. So thank you, Elliot. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've wanted to have you on for a really long time, and I'm glad that we finally got the chance. Cheers.
Thank you.
And today's ending fact comes from expandedramblings.com. And we've been looking at their WordPress statistics, and we loved this one, that apparently this is a little bit old because it was last collected in 2015. But the number of comments that have been left on WordPress sites is 3 billion. But the number of posts that have been made, Nathan, do you have that figure there?
I have 2.5 billion.
Wow. So there.
So they're about the same, aren't they? So basically, on average, a WordPress post gets one comment. Well, of course, we know that's just junk. That's not how it works at all. Some posts get hundreds, possibly thousands, and the vast majority of posts, you only have to go over to WP Build's website. Actually, we use Facebook comments, so that this wouldn't even be measured, presumably. No. The vast majority of blogs out there don't receive anything. I always feel a little bit sad when I read an article which obviously is using WordPress comments and somebody spent ages writing it, and I scroll to the bottom only to discover I'm the first person to leave a comment. I feel a little bit upset about that sometimes.
Yeah, I do the same. And also, I didn't understand how people used to get those comments when they started their blogs. I realise now, of course, they have other channels and networks that they're active on, and that's how they drag people to their posts. But I didn't get that when I first tried to do a blog. It was just very sad. Oh,
I see that you did your own and nobody came along.
Yeah, I made my post and I thought, this is stunning. I put my heart and soul into this. 2 weeks of work, honing every word, and then it just sat there.
Well, our posts are using, like I say, Facebook comments on the wpbuilds.com website. Mostly it's blank, we have a few people who come along quite often and post something, their one or two comments. On the whole, I would say that after we post, it's blank, but we get more engagement in the Facebook group, don't we? So I wonder if this whole commenting thing is dying out in the face of Facebook and Twitter and all of that kind of stuff. Instead, people would rather just share it than comment on it.
Yeah, we've got a discussion there, what comment system we should use.
There you go. Okay, well, yeah, it's too late now. Right. Okay, there you go. WordPress comments, lots and lots and lots and lots of them, it turns out, over the years. I bet you it's up to sort of 4 billion now. Right, thanks for listening to the WP Builds podcast once again. I have been Nathan Wrigley.
And I've been David Walmsley.
Thank you very much. Go to the player on the website and click it and click all the buttons underneath and share it on iTunes and generally share the love. And we'll fade in the cheesy music and say see you later, see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.